what's good, fam? Instrumentality's on that, we good again. And we flipping out like the end of my brim. Tryna get that good, so I throw in the fin. Getting it in, living it win, reminiscing. We can give a fuck about tomorrow's begin. So we at Water Tower till they think that we residents. Posted on walls like Facebook messages.
Let's be honest, the animation industry is a far ways away from way back when. Nowadays, series are put on this sink-or-swim type scenario where if it doesn't pull in amazing numbers from day one, companies just straight up give up on the property in question without giving a single second thought. It's a practice that's been around for a while before the 2020s, correct, but it's been more prominent nowadays than most. And it's acts like these that do remind me to cherish the entertainment that we do have around, because it's hard to tell what'll happen to them with networks that seem to only want to generate money and end up doing nothing. With the entertainment industry as a whole in a weird sort of spot as a whole, with layoffs, ideas being shut down, or not even getting the chance to show what they're fully made of, these days you can't really blame me for relying on an old favorite to remember how good things were back then. Ah, Steven Universe. You were a series of such beauty, such power, such wisdom. There's not much I can say that hasn't been said about you before. Even a decade since your original series premiered, there's so much about you that I find so captivating. Your music, your colors, your designs, your cast. They all come together to make something that, while I can't outright call perfect, was a different experience when I revisited you years later. It's been almost 5 years since we've seen the end of one of CN's most iconic, memorable, and groundbreaking series in the network's history. And with it being so long since its last iteration, I myself am not too sure what the general consensus is on the series as a whole. A lot of people seem conflicted on the way the whole thing was executed, the way plots and characters were written. Come to think of it, the only thing that I can kind of see people agreeing on when it comes to the show is that the media that came after its original finale was just right for a series and cast like this. In our last outing discussing the show, I went over the beginnings of the series as a whole, those being its first 3 seasons, what initially made it what it was, how it started to grow with its audience, and the absolute powerhouses and iconic moments that led up to these videos' creations in the first place. And today, we return to Steven Universe to finish off what we started, by going over the latter half of its original series, plus its journey into the theatrical side of animation, and the very conclusion of an IP so split down the middle as this. But before we do that, I do request that if you do find yourself enjoying the video, or any of my previous ones, I ask that you do leave a like and a comment to help with its reach. I don't usually ask for stuff like this, but unfortunately the last part got hit with limited ads, making it nearly non-monetizable. With that being said, welcome once again ladies, gentlemen, and that beautiful technical rainbow in between, to a retrospective on a series that has many ups and downs, triumphs, failures, and conclusions. Welcome to Steven Universe, Fandom, Family, and Finality.
I can't believe we've come so far. Happily ever after. Happily ever after. Here we are.
After a shocking revelation that came from the last season's final episodes, the show immediately decides to continue on from the point after the events of the kindergarten and Jasper, throwing us back into a pack of episodes that can fall into the area of townie/gem shenanigans. Some of them are pretty insightful and a great step towards developments like Know Your Fusion, Last One Out of Each City, or 3 Gems and a Baby, and some are just fine, ultimately forgettable looks at the supporting cast like Buddy's Book or Future Boy Zoltron.
Zoltron sees sadness in your future, no matter what you do.
Much like in chapters previous, here comes a glaring issue with this season when it comes to its storytelling. It's juggling of both its story and its comedy. I know not everything needs to be explored all at once, especially for a show like this, but being completely honest, the more this series does this, the more it disappoints with presenting itself. I mean, we just found out that Pink Diamond was shattered by Rose Quartz, a twist that spun off so many possibilities for the show to tackle. If I was a fan watching at the same time, I think I'd want more of that than finding out how a Looney Tunes styled episode of Peridot and Steven catching a corrupted gem would play out. There are a few episodes that I legitimately love from this half of the season, ones that, if put into a season with a much less padded out part of the show, I would legitimately call them a true effort by the crew to do what they do best. But they do become muddied the more the show goes on, and it's hard to blame anyone for falling off watching the series, much like I did. Me personally, I fell off watching the series at this exact point, around the episode Gem Harvest. Looking back, there was nothing wrong with the episode itself. It's got a comfy atmosphere, some nice world development, but it was just the point that I started asking myself, is this even worth trying to continue now?
They just really needed a place. They're alien refugees from space and
They're illegal aliens? What? You couldn't even marry an American?
There are a couple saving graces for this half, however. Number one, even though it does take a while, we do eventually get flung back into events that do matter in the grand scheme of things, which we will get to in a bit. And two, it contains my absolute favorite episode for this season with Mindful Education. Now, when slated against the other episodes in this season, in my opinion, none of them take the top spot compared to this. It once again, like I mentioned a lot in part 1, tackles a gigantic theme in the series as a whole, communication, but does it in a unique way when compared to episodes I discussed previously by including both Steven and Connie in the mix. At this point in the series, these two have been through a lot, being trained specifically for threats that could eventually do some real damage. So it's here where we see those feelings manifest, Steven with the different gems he's failed to help up until this point, and Connie with an out-of-nowhere reaction caused by her constant training. None of them are issues that are bigger than the other, since the direction of the episode goes specifically for how the way they do the things they do is affected because of these feelings. It's an episode that perfectly exemplifies how, for the most part, Garnet has managed to keep herself together. It's something that from time to time I do find myself wanting to talk about separately, because it is such a point of interest and actually holds a valuable lesson for people caught in the middle of an emotional storm where it's hard to think clearly. It's something in this episode that I need to give props for. Not to mention that, much like Mr. Greg and Jailbreak, this episode has a contender for one of my favorite songs in the series with Here Comes a Thought. A song I could only ever describe as magical. The melody, the composition, the lyrics, and especially the performance by Estelle and AJ Michalka. It comes together so well to deliver one of Steven Universe's most powerful songs, and definitely deserves its credit as such.
Take a moment to think of just flexibility, love, and trust. Take a moment to think of just flexibility, love, and trust.
This episode holds so much importance for the development of our young main characters, and in a season where it gets a little bit more difficult to remember that, this stands out as a proud reminder of it, and that, to me at least, makes it all the more special.
I'm here.
A highlight for the season's A half is one where a lot of the enjoyment for me personally comes from. A series of episodes that, honest to God, is the closest I've gotten to consistent excitement in this season. These episodes comprise of an arc so enjoyable that it was actually the inspiration for the title of the very segment that you're watching.
We're going into space, and we're not coming back without Greg.
Finally, after so much beating around the bush, after episode of hit or miss, we get a collection in the middle of the season that focuses on giving the story what it needs. With a combination of the previous season's teaser and Steven finding out more about Pink Diamond, this arc of episodes hits a running start with a main focus of Greg being kidnapped by Blue Diamond to be part of a human zoo. The arc of episodes gives us a peek at not only the structure of the Diamond Authority after being told about their exploits for so long, but also an albeit small look into two of the biggest players in the story, their motivations and struggles for what they do, and why they play the part of the bad guys. From the get-go, you get hints of a deeper mystery. Their reactions are believable as people who have been through it. Mistakes were made and now they face one of their family being taken away.
She was shattered by a rose quartz. The entire cut of gem deserves the same fate.
But they were hers.
This part of the season, although relatively small, I found myself coming back to quite a bit. An effort from the gems to play their parts carefully, infiltrating a diamond-inhabited space, and avoiding certain death is just the shake-up a story like this could have used. Not to mention the excitement a premise like this and its execution brought during all these episodes, especially with the addition of What's the Use of Feeling Blue, one of the series' lesser appreciated numbers. It actually brings me back to the days of Ocean Gem, where the show had a role for each of the main cast to play, something that the show wouldn't be seen doing until the next season, but more on that later. Even the points where they expand the world of the series here do kind of hit some creepy season 1 notes. There's something unsettling to me about the concept of a human zoo. Hundreds of generations of humans who were just used to the system they were born into, a routine on the ship that's floating around space, relatively unaware of any new ideas besides that routine. Doesn't inspire the most positive vibe from it, and if that was the intention, then massive props to the team.
Look, back on Earth, there was no voice to tell you who to be with. It was your own decision.
Greg, this makes no sense. Why wouldn't you want to be chosen?
This arc brought so much with it. A deeper look at the series world beyond Beach City, a chance to have our main team actually do something important, an expansion of the story, an introduction of new players in its game, and so much more. This is one heist that was pulled off successfully, for sure. Initially, I was gonna write off the B half of the season as not much to note about. After such an exciting adventure, we're thrown back into a sea of townie episodes. But I will admit it does do a few things I enjoy. For one, it offers an angle of townie episodes that I found to be more enjoyable than most, focusing mainly on characters that either haven't gotten enough time on screen or needed a facelift character-wise, like Lars. Except you. I still don't like you.
You're just a guy with a blog!
Is that love? Is that acceptance? Maybe you're the one that isn't a crystal gem.
Oh my god, I don't fucking care.
Like, for as much as the show loved shoving these two, especially in every season, does kick off a group of episodes that, while not all that important to the main story, does act as a charming little side story that, not gonna lie, I did want to see more of. And that's something that was harder to come by the more I watched. And a little cherry on top being how the show ends off season 4 with the most cryptic and mysterious closers in the entirety of the show's history.
Good night, Steven.
Good night, Sadie.
It ends in what I can call a good mix between adventure and suspense for the series, making a callback to one of the first few interactions with Homeworld in Season 1. A thread that actually makes it difficult for our main cast, and an ending that opens up the next season quite nicely. The danger feels real. The moments of complete fear feels real. This is an ending that had me hooked, with Steven willingly giving himself up for the safety of his friends. One can only hope that the next season follows through and then some.
But wait! There's more!
But even though the season's over, there's something that needs addressing. It's around this and Season 3's time in the spotlight where a ton of the criticisms regarding the series were made. Some understandable, others not so much. This is what I could call a dark time in the way the series was received critically. While yes, there were some people that did go out of their way to praise the series throughout its time on air, it was a fruitless effort compared to the way that people were shitting on it. And by far, no critic has been more effective at changing the series' outlook on people more than one Lily Orchard. Now, Lily is someone I would consider a relatively well-known online figure. Being around for years, she's made her fair share of videos on series that weren't necessarily Steven Universe itself. Legend of Korra, Turning Red, Pokemon, but by far, one of the few videos that has had the biggest impact has been Steven Universe's garbage, and here's why. A 2-hour rant on the many flaws that she saw in the series itself. Now believe me, I don't go out of my way to claim every series is perfect and doesn't deserve to be criticized, but the way Lily's video is structured has me agreeing with her in some points and completely dumbfounded in others, some like losing itself in its story. Something that I've even noticed in my first video does make sense. The series does tend to flip-flop between wanting to be a monster/adventure of the week type story and a story-driven romp, and can't decide between the two.
Nearly every arc has this issue. The Jasper arc from Gem Hunt to Earthlings has Bismuth smacked in the middle of it. The Homeworld arc has Dewey Wins, Gemcation, and Kevin Party wedged inside it. And the Pink Diamond arc that immediately follows has 5 episodes jammed between it before anything remotely resembling a conclusion starts to inch its way forward. The biggest contributor to this constant starting and stopping is the fact that Steven Universe plays out like any other cartoon. But unlike any other cartoon, it's lashed to Steven himself at all times. So while in theory, the plot tends to play out at a relatively realistic pace, all the important and interesting things are happening completely off screen. This is why there are so many episodes about Steven bumming around Beach City, why there are so many episodes where Steven is hanging out with some other gem only for the plot to come bursting through the wall, or a character's personal issues just jump right out of the blue.
Bismuth is another issue that I found myself agreeing with too. When someone as important and, dare I say, essential to the past of our main characters shows up and is bubbled by the end of the very same episode, it's not going to reflect well in the show overall. Honestly, this was something that I wanted to bring up in part 1 but forgot to at the time, and I feel that. And for the most part at least, Lily does bring it to light as a valid argument. But on the other hand, a few of the points itself I just can't see the validity in. This is around the time where calling writers, showrunners, pretty much anyone that worked in animation idiots was an unfortunate norm, and it definitely is really apparent here. It's less so like Lily is trying to critique the show at times, and more so that she just wants to go out of her way to insult and belittle Rebecca Sugar. Of course, her and the crew don't deserve shielding from criticism, but going out of your way to say that the person that wrote this never left their house or is a bad animator doesn't really give you the best leg to stand on. Like, I know the show has gotten shit for its inconsistent animation in the past, trust me, but when you're calling something like this badly animated, you kinda need to rethink your criticism. It's almost as if to get multiple episodes out at once, they need to outsource to multiple animation studios on tight deadlines. But hey, what do I know, right?
Most cartoons have animation errors, and a lot of modern cartoons are absolutely packed with them, but they often amount to glitches. With Steven Universe, it's a direct decision by the creators to say fuck it to the very concept of effort.
It also translates to her other points about the show too. Like the implication of the show being racist despite the fact that both Coach Steven and Cry for Help happen in the exact same season and explains why Sugalite acts the way she does is just cruel. You're making points that don't need to be made because they don't exist. Sugalite, whether you like it or not, is shown to be dangerous because of the power she holds. Not just here, but in real life. Egos do tend to clash into something worse. It's why the word ego is, for the most part, associated with negativity. Like Garnet said in Cry for Help,
I could be brash, you could be reckless, and we can both get carried away. So, for the time being, Sugalite is benched.
So then, why frame it that way? There's a ton more that the video goes into. Once again, some I agree and some I just don't, but I'd rather get into more of the series after this. No matter which way you slice it, this was the beginning of the criticism for Steven Universe as a whole, even to this day. I'm not saying that Lily was the sole reason people dug into the show like this, far from it, but when compared to the myriad of other content on the show, her video does still remain one of the biggest points of contention, especially with a piece of content that the said creator, quote unquote, doesn't agree with anymore. In comparison to the 4 seasons we covered, I feel Steven Universe's 5th and final season has me the most conflicted on whether I consider it good or bad. It was the show's last hurrah, and if it were without the context of the movie or future being announced at the time, I probably would have given this season of the show a lot less of a pass. But what I feel affects season 5 is the idea that so much is being stuffed in these last 20 or so episodes without second thought. Episodes in the A half of the season, or at least the first 4 or so episodes, are great. All of them are on that adventurous side of Steven Universe that I found myself enjoying from seasons past. With Steven sacrificing himself in order to save his friends from Earth, we're taken on a journey that follows through on a bunch of the hints that were given to us since the end of season 3, with the reintroduction of the diamonds, the developing mystery of what really happened to Pink, and the death and revival of Lars.
Maybe you only eat magical lizards now like Lion. Are you hungry for lizards?
No, I do not want a lizard.
This part of the season really does attempt to give one hell of a show with stakes that, in my opinion, could be compared to seasons previous. Introductions to new characters such as the Offcutters, who I found to be pretty endearing, and character shifts that, honest to God, were a long time coming. What they do with Lars both here and in the end of season 4 really made me root for him. It was obvious that the creator, Rebecca Sugar, really did like him and Sadie, and for better or for worse, the season tends to focus on the two a lot more than once previous. And being completely honest, I do like the switch in characterization here. The build-up for it is done with literally killing off the character, which is weird to describe, I know, but somehow it works towards its benefit here. It does actually feel like the Lars from season 1 that I couldn't really tolerate for more than an episode or two actually improved and became a different character. If there's anything that these episodes establish, it's the players in the endgame of the series. It's told to us through a mixture of good animation and dialogue that the current situation and all previous story-based entries in the series were all leading up to this point. The diamonds are no one to mess with, and if anything were to stop Steven and co, it would most likely be them.
You think you can get away, Rose? You stood your ground on that little speck called Earth. But you're on our world now.
The episodes after this are of note as well. After a suspenseful ending, the overall dynamic between Steven, the Gems, and Connie are put to the test. Everything seems to fall apart as that trust that Steven and Connie had is put to the test. There's that sense that even though everything is pretty much ended off without a hitch for Steven, the Gems themselves and Beach City are kept in the state of uncertainty. With the looming threat of a potential diamond attack, everything has been thrown off balance. You have Steven and Connie's slight falling out, Lap is abandoning her new home under the fears of what might happen, and the town going out of its way to make some real change by electing a new leader. It's these episodes that have what I personally consider a nice enough return to the vulnerability in these characters that we haven't had for at least a good season or two. It makes sense as to why they act this way. It makes sense as to why the split-ups, outbursts, and revelations do happen. It helps to further establish that even though much has passed, our characters have a lot left to go through. And to top it all off, it's around this moment in the series episodes where we get probably one of the biggest development-centric arcs in the show, starting off with A Single Pail of Rose. One of the biggest reveals in the series is Rose Quartz's real identity, what she did and how she did it. It's something that couldn't be forced or played too loose since pretty much every major tragedy, betrayal, plot point, both future and past, can stem from just these events. And as it stands, at this point 10 years since the show's premiere and 4 years since its end, the reveal might have not been executed all that well. Alright, let me explain. Rose Quartz is considered the premier driving force of the series. Her actions as Pink Diamond and Rose explain everything that goes on, but the way it was slowly revealed to us seems kind of jumbled. We get hints of her life post-war, which are actually great from a production and writing standpoint, but we only get a full scope of what she did and why she did it near the end of the series. And by that point, people are either dropping off the show because of how scattershot the pacing of episodes was, or just sticking by it to be disappointed way later.
Well, let's take a look-see. You should make sure you get this thing polished at least twice a year.
And I'm sorry, but this is an episode that just doesn't feel earned. If we maybe had a few episodes scattered throughout that showed Pink going through all she went through, how she betrayed Bismuth after her confrontation with the Breaking Point, how her life was when she was living with the Diamonds, maybe a 40-minute special or a 3-episode long event, anything. All this could have been a much more effective reveal if they weren't spread through one episode during multiple seasons, sometimes stuffed with 90% safe, boring filler throughout. And unfortunately, the twist we got heavily affected our team of heroes, with Garnet literally unraveling and both Ruby and Sapphire splitting after a fight, and Amethyst being unsure of what to think. All this seems warranted, but it doesn't feel warranted, if that makes sense. The episodes that lead up to it are probably the only good things that save this part of the season in my opinion. We get a good look at the new resolve these characters get after the events that take place, and a long overdue reintroduction to and conversation with Bismuth takes place that I feel gives Steven a much needed new point of view.
They're not gonna side with Rose anymore. Not after—
I'm not talking about Rose, I'm talking about you.
But I'm not the leader. Garnet's the leader.
And where's Garnet?
And although the reveal of Rose was quite the letdown, these are the episodes that build up towards what I consider the best this season has up its sleeve in terms of quality: Reunited. Now, despite Season 5's shortcomings, this episode brought it back home for me. Even back during the premiere of this episode, this is what sparked that interest in the show after being burned by it so many times. After so much uncertainty, so much infighting with how every event of the series played out, this episode genuinely feels special to me. A wedding between Ruby and Sapphire is suddenly interrupted by both Blue and Yellow Diamond, and what goes down is a much needed return to the action and high stakes that haven't been seen since the high points of Season 1 and 2.
You hope to defeat me by clinging to my feet?
I just needed to keep you from taking 3 steps to the right.
What might be the most interesting fact, however, is how this episode kinda spelled doom for the series at the time. The creator and crew fought hard for the wedding between Ruby and Sapphire, and even though they got what they wanted, it came with the price of ending the series with 5 seasons. Essentially, it's cancellation. Our gems, although put through their fair share of hardships with the season, are united during this one time, all leading the charge to hold their grounds against the series' heaviest hitters, and for most of the episode this holds true. The moment where Steven tries to communicate with the Diamonds both makes sense in some areas and doesn't in others, but with that in mind, the episode has had no shortage or surprises, and in my opinion at least, is one of the very last episodes that truly felt like an event when it came to Steven Universe.
It's you, Pink.
We're here. Really?
Ugh, what gives?
Homeworld.
Welcome home, Pink.
The final few episodes that build up towards Steven Universe's finale are probably one of the biggest points of both praise and criticism from the fandom at large. At this point, there's no more filler, no more townies. Steven Universe has been set on its final course with no stops. It's why the very name of this segment has the name it does. Homeworld as an area just hits that line of alien to the cast and the people watching. No green grass, no blue sky. It really does fully embrace the unknown here. And the episodes themselves complement that. They range from the creepy to the informative to the helpful. To me at least, landing each feeling it's going for quite well, and including each of the cast as much as possible. There's a lot of insight that can be found with this. How the Diamonds both felt and dealt with the loss of Pink. How exactly their authority works in a world that wasn't what we were used to. It all comes together to still make this interesting for me years later. For the final few episodes of a series like this, there's that attempt to cap off certain things, and like a lot of things this season, it does well in some areas and ignores other mysteries. But what can possibly be the most interesting, and was interesting to me, is the send-off for the original show, Change Your Mind. So, this finale is weird. Some people like it, a lot of people don't, and there are some people that have criticized it to hell and back, some of which are predators. But while Change Your Mind isn't perfect, like, at all, I myself do appreciate it in a weird sort of way. Yes, it doesn't make any sort of attempt to cap off any mysteries the show set besides 2. Yes, it has a lot of flaws, but I do believe that for all the show's hiccups throughout 5 seasons, this was meant to be the overall endgame of the series, at least for a bit. This is just one massive dash towards the end. Steven does what he has to do in this situation, and with a character that's as empathetic as can be, it would make sense that he would use violence as a last resort, thus leading to an ending that, despite all criticism levied towards this episode, I still think is pretty special. One of the underlying themes within Steven himself is a sense of identity. From the very beginning, one of his driving forces was to figure out who he was. Was he Pink Diamond? Was he the second Rose Quartz? Was he the new leader of the Crystal Gems? Even White, in probably one of the series' most eerie moments, digs into him with these thoughts.
See how you surround yourself with lower life forms? You've smothered yourself in them. It feels good, doesn't it, Pink? Dulling your power, hiding your face, blaming everything on someone else. You became Rose Quartz to deceive your pathetic friends, and now you've improved on that because you're even deceiving yourself.
But in what I consider one of the best moments in the show, in a scene of little dialogue and pure joy and laughter, instead of full-on violence or starting a new war, just a few words were able to take down one of the biggest threats of the series, which, as corny as it can be, I do enjoy.
I am a child. What's your excuse?
It's a top 5 moment in the episode, and while this finale won't be on anyone's top 10 list anytime soon, I do feel isn't as terrible as people say. Steven Universe is a flawed series, a lot of the times repeating the same issues throughout its run or not giving the proper development for its characters. But something special that I feel does keep it entertaining is that even with its focus being lost, it tries its best to keep its themes within view: communication, identity, love. For all its flaws, this series has had these in the bag, and even though there's still much more to discuss about this show, that's something critics, detractors, or some other third thing can't take away from it. I'd be lying if I didn't say that part of the reason these two videos existed wasn't to finally be able to properly talk about Steven Universe the movie. And being completely honest, can you blame me? CN's movies are a dime a dozen when it came to actually and actively celebrating their lineup. And at the time, Steven, being one of their heavy hitters, rising out of the ashes of cancellation like a phoenix and delivering a powerful musical adventure like no other movie from CN or any of its competition, was a sight that had to be seen to be believed. I mean, I know it's a bit cliche to say you just had to be there, but you really did just have to be there. At a time where Steven Universe was either considered complete fandom trash by some people or being praised to high hell after its initial ending, here these characters were, grown up but resembled the same fun-loving ones that we watched throughout 5 seasons, their performers delivering in the same fashion of which they embodied their characters in years previous, an actually interesting end-of-the-world plot, a villain proven as a threat that we will get to later, and a conclusion that captures the theming of this movie as a whole. There's just a lot to talk about a movie like this. The plot's an interesting one to start off with for sure. A whole 2 years post the events of Season 5's Change Your Mind, we're introduced to a world and cast of characters that have established and experienced a new era of peace post their fight with the Diamonds. But just when they thought they could rest on their laurels, a mysterious new gem is brought into frame, threatening to destroy the Earth by planning on using a mysterious new machine on it, but also resetting Steven and the gem's forms unlike anything they were before. With this new situation our heroes are thrown into set like this, it's up to Steven to help the gems regain their memories and stop Spinel before Beach City is destroyed. Like I mentioned in a video previous, when it comes to these TV show adaptations, for something big like a feature film, you can only go one of a few ways to make it interesting. But a movie like this had the pre-established issue of having to deal with one of these plots and making it its own, executing it in its own way. It makes as many callbacks to the original series as possible, but doesn't make it overbearing. It treats these characters' origins and past struggles with respect, so that when a scene comes around that brings them back to their original selves, it rounds it out as a revisit of what these characters have been through.
One hit with this, you're back to how they made you.
Oh my stars, I touched it! I could have lost all my character development!
Speaking of characters, I feel with this movie, there's a lot of space to appreciate the arc that Steven goes on as a whole. He spent the better part of 2 years dismantling the empire that the Diamonds built, a time where it's safe to assume that there weren't many dangers to face, so having his time of peace be shattered completely by a new threat does put the guy on a trial unlike anything he's gone head to head with in the past. He's facing a new foe that isn't just a threat to him, his family and his world, but one that is directly affected by the actions of one Pink Diamond. So on top of everything, he's forced to go through his mother's past as well. And as you may know, a lot of this does mean that he goes through a lot here. Even with his interactions with the effective gems, he struggles with them. These are people that he's come to know as family, even siblings. So he not only has to keep in mind what they went through over the past 4 to 5 years, but figuring out what specific events could trigger the possibility of their memories coming back.
Maybe we need to hit her where it hurts.
What?
You know, her original boss, the love of her life, the reason she rebelled in the first place.
Mom, she's gotta remember Mom, but...
If that's what it takes...
This type of hero's journey in a movie like this, I personally feel fits well with a character that has gone through as much as he has. In movies like these, it's nice to see that the characters are still either going to keep improving or going up against new threats, and that to me is interesting here. The same can also apply to the Crystal Gems as well. Whether you agree with me or not, a large majority of the past 5 seasons were spent putting these 3 through the development of their lives, loss of oneself, untrustworthiness, feeling like the problems that you face are yours alone. These were issues that spun off some of the best character-centric arcs in the series, and to know that a lot of them do add to the efforts that Steven puts into bringing back the Gem's memories make this movie all the more enjoyable. It's shown to us through a mixture of visuals reminiscent of the arcs themselves, alongside good music, that the movie acts as a charming nostalgia piece for all that these characters have been through. Stuff like revisiting the kindergarten in No Matter What, or the visual of Pearl losing Rose and going through her own evolution during Independent Together. These bring home the idea of change and the evolution in a character, which I do appreciate. Something that acts like a cherry on top of this has to be the music here. With the series, I do like and appreciate a lot of the music, but with the movie, Ivy and Sarushu's production was given a leg up to sound a lot more cinematic. Tracks like Happily Ever After, Other Friends, and Change bring that specific flavor of enjoyability for a movie like this, making sure to keep the audience invested with a mix of pro composing and snappy lyrics that makes the movie what it is. And by far, one of the biggest selling points and factors that led to this movie's greatness status is undeniably its villain, Spinel. Those of you who've been around for a while know how much I love my fictional animated antagonist, but for this movie, she takes the cake. A combination of trauma, abandonment issues, and envy, and what she brings to the table here cannot be understated. Back when this movie was announced and the trailer was making the rounds, I distinctly remember everyone going crazy over her reveal specifically, from her voice delivery by the ultra-talented Sarah Stiles, the Rubber Hose era throwback in her movements, and of course her sad backstory that makes her so compelling in the first place. She does a lot for this movie, not just in being a threat, but feeling like a piece that completes it. And one of the things that I especially think make this movie for me is the theme that it carries. For seasons, I've been hammering home that communication and change are big ideas that the show has tried to carry from day one. But here it's the acceptance of change, your development. Steven throughout has tried to fight it for most of the movie, but it was a lesson that, though harsh, was one he needed to learn if he was ever gonna save the day. And that to me is something that I really appreciate here. There's so much more of this movie that could be expanded on, but I thought I'd let someone else take the mic for this one. Ladies and gents, introducing Luhan.
Hi, I'm Lou Ham. I make videos about stuff, and what you just saw was the reaction of hundreds of fans ecstatic about the announcement of an official Steven Universe movie. Up until this point, the franchise amassed 5 seasons, multiple video games, tons of merch, a huge fan base, and one of the worst leaks in the network's history. With both the fandom and the crew recognizing the show's approaching climax, it was unclear on how everything would be tied up from multiple ends. What about the hundreds of other colonies? What about the specifics of Era 3? What about the contents of Steven's chest? With all of these looming questions over the series' conclusion, the mere confirmation of a follow-up installment was a relief to many. And with the news that there'd be more songs with the film being more of a musical, I confidently deduced at the time that this would be the best thing to come out of the franchise as a whole, but I'll elaborate on that. For now, I just want to start out with the presentation. The allure of animated films based on TV have all but dwindled in the past 20 years or so. Other than the SpongeBob movies or the Powerpuff Girls, you rarely see heavily discussed cartoon movies, let alone one with an intended theater release. However, the advantage with either of those is the increase in budget, and you see that everywhere. From the first official poster to the opening track of the film, everyone's proportions feel on model and significantly more consistent, which is a common criticism of the franchise that I think is blown a bit out of proportion. Specifically in season 3 with episodes like Hit the Diamond, these charts were everywhere on social media back in the day. The increase of the color palette is a welcome addition as well. I love the vibrance that Little Homeworld brings to the table, even if the specifics of the location is reserved for the sequel series. The main symbol or representation for this increased potential is the existence of Spinel. Played by Sarah Styles, this character is the personification of flex. Every single scene she's in is a treat. Her design being so simple and based off the 30s rubber hose era gives ample room to experiment with how she moves, how many limbs can she manipulate, how high she can jump, how strong is she, and they take full advantage. The sequences of other friends and change feature the best animation we've seen in the franchise, no question. From the fight choreography to the camera movement, perspective changes, Spinel's made to be a truly threatening force to be reckoned with. And yet, everything in between contrasts this. Various stretching of her arms and frame to using them as a fishing rod to pick Steven up, no stone is left unturned. Even the way her googly eyes shake, it's crazy. Another way the movie respects the main series is the reforming sequences in between the various musical numbers. You can actually see in the various silhouettes some of the Gem's earlier designs, from Amethyst's Pearl impersonation from Reform to Pearl's pilot design and Independent together. The little details like this are very much welcome, giving the fans as many subtle callbacks as possible. The film genuinely had a lot going for it in today's animation landscape. A no commercial premiere, art book release with a planned theatrical release in March of 2020 being cancelled due to certain world events, but we did get a sing-along version with 2 new episodes of Future. This is one of the last cases of Cartoon Network really putting in the effort to have this movie succeed, and I'm glad that it did with the clear effort put into this film. Now, given a runtime of about 82 minutes with the film being a musical as well, naturally character development for already established characters would be a hassle without altering some form of their fundamental pieces. Thankfully, there's not much to talk about with the gems and townies that fans have come to love, so there mainly leaves 2 characters to talk about in an extended fashion. So we'll start with the titular guy. Steven, enduring a 2-year time skip here, is given a lot more en masse. For a character whose whole plot and ideology is based on communication and emotional maturity, it's interesting to think about where else he could go after deconstructing the colonialism of hundreds of planets, offering patience for the perpetrators in question, and contributing to the next era of civilization of an entire species, all before legally getting his license. So, as to signal the transition between the main series and Future, the film decides to make Steven more active and clear with his emotions emotions, specifically the more negative aspects. For example, when Spinel finally reforms from the effects of the Rejuvenator, Steven's reaction, while played up for comedic effect, shows signs of a more offensive mentality that we'll come to see later. Even down to the fight choreography in Change, Steven proceeds to trade blows with Spinel using mini bubbles as boxing gloves. His defensive and protective nature isn't lost, but the movie brings out a more explicit fight in him, creating a balance that I very much appreciate. Steven being the most conversational and pacifist of the cast for the gems to look to, it's refreshing to see those instinctive tendencies from the gems through Steven's actions, especially in combat. One thing that bugged me during my rewatch of the main series is the show's unwillingness to represent Steven's powers in more offensive scenarios other than a few cases. Steven's shield only being used as a projectile a few times, his bubbles growing spikes in season 4, even Steven giving his sword to Connie to wield, never having used it on his own. Don't get me wrong, I think it's interesting that he repurposed his powers to work on both ends, but with the image of his mother being described as a warrior of multiple ways, I just wish that side of his heritage was tapped into a little more in the main series. What makes this the most clear is really the beginning scene between the Diamonds and Steven. After Change Your Mind, one of the biggest criticisms about the show was the claim that everyone forgave the Diamonds. And while I understand that sentiment in the post Change Your Mind show, with this movie and especially in future later on, this doesn't make sense. Steven's resolving and reconnection with the Diamonds during the Diamond Days arc was more so stemmed from compromise and accountability from their broken familial bonds. And I do have my reservations about that approach. So in turn, the first 6 minutes showcase Steven's eagerness to create distance and space from them, with the nervous laughter and sweating. In the last 6 minutes of the film where the Diamonds offer to live with them, he's not even hiding it anymore in his face. He does not mess with them. All of these little moments throughout the film point towards not just a mature Steven, but a tired one as well. His limits are tested in such a short amount of time, and this is really the first in a few moments where we see the kid stressed. From weakened powers to actual blood from battle damage, this is the first time where I think the audience really feels Steven's stress. To unpack where Steven gets this newfound stress from, we gotta switch over to Spinel. To me is not only an interesting case on personifying trust and abandonment issues, but her character also offers an expansion on the gem species and how they operate. This being her first appearance, her backstory is explained in full. Her role within the gem hierarchy is more of a jester, a playmate as Blue describes, made to give the owner endless entertainment. But when Pink is finally awarded Earth as her first colony, the track Drift Away explains how Pink's final interaction with Spinel was to leave her under the guise of a game, having 6,000 years of her life to be wasted genuinely waiting for what was once a trusted friend. This backstory taps into a few things. One, it continues the trend of Pink's full story, for the most part being told backwards. Two, it specifically shows Pink's first realization of taking responsibility, of fulfilling the role she was made for and strived for up to this point. But most critically for me, it further describes the disconnect between gems seen as their roles and purposes as opposed to individuals, at least in the lens of the class system. We see Spinel's behavior post-rejuvenation play the role she was perfectly cut for. But even as she's reset, her fear of being alone is still present, and it progressively becomes worse as time goes on. But Pink doesn't consider this, even gesturing for her to stay before she comes up with this idea of a game. And seeing a pink diamond before everything, before the consideration of another gem as their own person, also speaks to the amount of change she's made up until Steven. Whether you consider this good or bad is based on your sense of morality, but these two being in different stages of their lives and one wanting more than the other, Pink's casting away of Spinel is akin to a kid growing out of a toy. But the obvious issue was them being the same species. This cast as system being programmed into these gems' brains to such a level from their reception and beyond, that this doesn't seem to be a second thought to Pink at any point. And this reflects all over Spinel's appearance. Whereas most of the other gems in the main series change forms signaling their progress and development, Spinel's form is a testament to the amount of pain bottled up and processed. And in similar contrast, whilst the gems in the main series got the time to talk and process their issues, Spinel pulls up on Earth and immediately wants to jump. It's not until losing in the end to which her self-awareness leads her to ponder about her actions and how she'll truly heal. And I'm glad that her character's point was to express how your own pain from someone doesn't deserve to be inflicted on anyone else. The bulk of the film's run is Steven attempting to jog the memories of the gems, recently attacked by yet another example of Pink's victims. And admittedly, the plot isn't exactly the most original in the world. But I'm a firm believer of the execution and characters being the main factors to a good piece of work and not the complexity of a plot. That being said, the reasoning behind the main plot is definitely intriguing. So the way the story goes is that Rebecca Sugar, in preparation for a trip to Japan, had to change her phone, and when asked to restore her device, she agreed, not knowing that would factory reset everything. A painful yet similar feeling for me, unfortunately. The first few ideas of the story was to explore how that type of regression would work with the gems for a show as dedicated to the growth of its characters. I love how literal they take this concept because of the various insights we come to know of gem life. It's never outright stated in the show, but gems are solar powered robots and not the typical organic aliens you'd think of. This explains so many behaviors within the show, from Amethyst glitching in an indirect kiss, to even Peridot's limb enhancers and insensitivity in season 2. Their behaviors and purposes are almost tied down to a binary, and it sometimes took Steven weeks to help gems adjust to Earth's culture. So the fact that he has to essentially speedrun thousands of years worth of character development in less than 48 hours ups the stakes a lot. And they do mess around with this concept a little bit. The way that each of the crystal gems come back to their former selves isn't necessarily Steven's attempts to retrace their pivotal steps, but it's the strong emotions associated with their backstories that allow them to gain their memories again, with each escapade just different enough, and I really like that. I'm not sure if it was intentional in any way, but it's fairly reminiscent of Gemglow with Steven's approach, with strong emotions being the source instead of recreating that exact moment activating his shield. It's nice. I don't mention the other crystal gems in the character section because for the most part they're set back to their most basic functions, which those familiar with the show already know. With the exception of Spinel, the audience has already seen these characters grow for over 6 years at this point, so the movie takes the factory reset route in a way to remind fans of their amount of progress, rather than attempt to mitigate or create more issues for them. A consequence of this is the lack of time to catch up with the townie characters, at least verbally. This is addressed in future as both projects were being developed around the same time, but I do wish more time was dedicated to Steven talking to the citizens other than Connie, which does make sense. Pacing wise, I think everything flowed decently. They did good by the amount of time given for a TV movie. If there's one thing I heavily disliked plot wise, it's Steven and Spinel's exchange before Spinel turns evil again. Not because of her rash thinking and anxiety clouding her judgment, that was pretty predictable but realistic with what we've seen so far. It's Steven's choice of wording here. The kid wasn't 100% perfect with his words in the main series, but I can't believe how badly he played this. Responding with "yeah, we can just forget about this" to someone as stressed and nervous as Spinel here is shocking. And his initial unwillingness to help Spinel's memories does not help this. It takes Peridot to remind him that he's dead either way. Steven's obsession with this concept of a happily ever after, this metaphorical space where every one of his conflicts are truly over and accounted for, bugs me so much with how Change Your Mind played out. To keep things brief, the main series treatment of the consequences from gems and the Diamond Authority in particular shifts from bluntly portraying the horrendous after effects of the rebellion to inciting the species change based off familial issues and personal conflict. And that shift in between the series run decreased the gravity of just how much work had to be done. So for Steven to truly believe that 2 years was enough to solve all those issues bugs me to no end, and yet I'm so glad that this is the route they decide to take with his character. So I'll leave it here. Steven Universe the movie, to me, is the best installment of the franchise as a whole because it knows exactly what it is and it goes all in. Because it's a musical, especially with the main series DNA, no punches are pulled with any of its parts. The cheesiness, the fast pacing, the exhilarating animation, everything about the film at its core screams appreciation for the art form and the show's legacy regardless of its history. And with the budget to back it up, so much of the shots shown are eye candy. The main series at times lost its footing a bit with its pace breaking in between seasons, but the tight runtime allows the characters to be put on a focus that's very refreshing as a longtime fan. If you like Steven Universe and especially musicals, this film very much suits that taste. I don't like giving numbered ratings, so I'll say that it's a really good watch. You definitely should check it out. I appreciate the opportunity to gush about the film for X amount of minutes. Thanks to the homie Geektoons for having me on this, and bye.
I'm not gonna lie to you, this goes up on my top list for adaptations. It gives us another adventure with these characters that I feel, had this been the last thing we've seen from them, I wouldn't have minded. But there's still one more thing to cover before we cap things off.
Life is a little different these days.
The year is 2019. In music, Tyler the Creator's Igor drops, Toy Story 4 is making people cry in theaters, again, and over on CN, fans of Steven Universe are greeted with a nice sort of return to the series. People were buzzing about a potential Season 6 for the series. What could they tackle? How would they tackle it? What could come next for Steven and co? Well, we didn't need to wait long with the premiere of... a take on the series that goes into how things are in Beach City post the events of Steven Universe the movie, similar to something like Dragon Ball Z or Naruto Shippuden. It carries this idea that although things are done and dusted with the diamonds, there still are things that need addressing when it comes to our main character and the world he inhabits. It really makes what Steven says at the end of his movie make more and more sense.
There's no such thing as happily ever after. I'll always have more work to do.
It's an idea that doesn't really get much thought here, especially for a Cartoon Network series. They took a chance on slightly more mature content, sure, but the idea would usually be that after the hero's journey, after everything they've been through, that was it. We don't usually get to revisit the characters after the events of the series and how things are, peaceful or otherwise. Steven Universe Future flips the script by shifting the spotlight onto Steven, not as the savior of the galaxy, but as a person trying to figure out who he really is outside of all the hero stuff. The series gets super introspective, showing us that it's not all about defeating villains or saving the day. It's about the aftermath, the what now. It's refreshing to see Steven stripped of his usual confidence and optimism. It's like the show is asking, who is Steven when there's no one left to save? This deeper exploration of identity makes this character feel so real and relatable, especially for anyone who's ever felt lost or unsure about their path in life. It's Steven at his most human.
Man, life is a wonderful mystery. Am I right?
Yeah, so, can you sign off on my class schedule?
Oh, right. Let me help you with that.
It goes hand in hand with the idea of backing away from the tone and pacing of the original series. While the original series was defined by its uplifting, adventurous spirit and sense of whimsy, this one feels more serious, more unsettling, and a lot more introspective. It's a decision that while some might not enjoy, a lot of people can appreciate the new tone for tackling its more grown-up themes in its own way. Now, one of the standout aspects of the series is how it proves to you that its world and characters have changed and grown post the events of the original series. Beach City has now entered an era of peace, being home to both gems and humans, the establishing of a safe haven of sorts for different gems that have been affected by the war. It all comes together to forge the idea that all is well in Steven's world. Well, except one. But we'll get to that later. They can range from pretty interesting, like Rosebuds and Volleyball, to honestly some of the series' biggest gut punches, like Together Forever or Mr. Universe. It attempts to connect the dots in both its story and the series' other mysteries left unsolved, at least for a few, whereas others are left in obscurity. Episodes in Future's 20-episode run tend to fall into one of two areas much like the original series, townie/gem shenanigans or story-driven episodes that move the story along. And as opposed to a lot of the crap that we've had to go through with seasons 4 and 5, I feel a lot of episodes pre the series finale do act as a much better improvement when compared to before.
So is this at school you mentioned? Yeah, welcome.
But by far, out of the 20 episodes we got, Bismuth Casual remains my favorite. It doesn't push the plot along that much, but I personally feel it more than makes up for that by being a special blend of the two types of episodes this season, offering a good look at both Steven's insecurities with him being so out of touch because of his gem side, and the continued bond that our main characters and gems share as we get more insight into what they do outside of saving Beach City. It's got a comfy atmosphere, great interactions between our cast, and feels like a good fit for a stage of the show like this. Now, I know why a lot of people still remember this part of the show. Besides everything I mentioned before, one of the biggest things that draws people to it is what happens to its main character, Steven.
My body, it's reacting like it's the end of the world.
Something worth noting is the way the creators approach the themes of trauma and healing, especially with one Steven Quartz universe. Post everything in the original series, Change Your Mind and the movie, realizing that he's himself and not another pink diamond or rose quartz, it kicks off an emotional journey harboring all the baggage and traumatic walls that could come from a character that has been through so much as he has. You have to keep in mind, with the context of the original series, this kid has had to not only hold everything together when things looked rough for his family, but also fight an intergalactic war with threats that could actually kill him, all while at a young age. So as you can imagine, that doesn't really translate so well to a Steven that has no clue what's going to happen in a time where everything looks so peaceful. It's a type of storytelling that while, once again, I can't just outright call perfect, does make sense. It doesn't shy away from showing the messy, complicated road to healing. Steven's outbursts, moments of vulnerability, and eventual acceptance of seeking help reflect real-life struggles, making his journey relatable for viewers of all ages, and has the added advantage of being a coming-of-age story that fits right in with the audience that grew up with the show, flaws and all. But while I do enjoy Future, I think a lot of what it does here is pretty neat, I do feel the pacing of its season overall doesn't work the best towards it. Right off the bat, Steven Universe Future sets the tone by focusing on Pink Steven's mysterious new powers, effectively acting as one of the series' main mysteries, pulling viewers into a story that feels bigger, darker, and more personal for Steven.
Dad, your tour! I've ruined your—
Don't worry about me. Just get some rest, kiddo. You don't have to solve all your problems in one night.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
Going back to the series, a key element that deserves attention is the music. The series really shines in how it uses its soundtrack as an emotional backbone. Sure, it's not packed with musical numbers like its predecessor, but every song and piece of background music feels intentionally crafted to mirror Steven's inner turmoil. The melodies are subtler, reeling into reflective tones rather than the bombastic anthems of the original, and this shift works perfectly for a show diving into more mature themes. Now, this is all well and good. The mystery is building up. We get an amazing slate of episodes that act as a good build-up with Steven's transformations and traumatic outbursts. See context clues that have shocking revelations for both Steven and the rest of the cast. But one major issue plagues the series to this day, and even back when watching it, and that's the big issue that the finale kinda sucks. Let me explain. I mean the episode before it, episode 19, I Am My Monster. It was an episode that was slowly but surely shaping up to be one of major development with how the episodes before it played out. Steven outright admitting the situation he's in to his closest friends and family, refusing to admit his problems before they're too late. It's as dramatic and as emotional as you can get. His emotions manifesting him into a monstrous form that even he himself can't control. But I'm sorry, it's just not the kind of format for a finale like this. The transformation takes over more than half of the episode. Most of the episode is just the cast placing blame on themselves, and so it doesn't offer enough incentive for the resolution in the end. It all feels too safe, too fast, and doesn't give the final episode, being human, enough weight, as emotional as that episode can be. And I love that episode too. It feels like the perfect conclusion for a series like this, but much like Rose Quartz's reveal, it just doesn't feel earned. At the very least, being human does kind of redeem it a tiny bit. It wraps up the series with a powerful message about moving forward and learning to let go of the past. Steven's journey shows us that growth isn't always linear. It's messy, painful, and sometimes downright confusing. But it's also necessary. The series doesn't offer easy answers or quick fixes. Instead, it emphasizes that healing takes time and that it's okay to leave behind what no longer serves you. By the end, Steven learns that he doesn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. There's a bittersweet beauty in his decision to step away and carve out his own path. It's a lesson about embracing change and finding peace in the unknown, leaving fans with a sense of hope and closure that, while stumbling a little bit, felt like the proper way to end a series like this. When everything's done and dusted, I did end up enjoying Future a lot more than I should. Believe me, it has its flaws, a lot of them, but throughout its run, I can sense that the series and crew behind it wanted to give Steven and co. a proper goodbye that they never could have gotten with the original series. And with how much the landscape has changed for storytelling since it ended, I don't think my appreciation for it could really fade away. At the end of the day, I think all things considered, Steven deserves its place on people's top lists of shows. It was a different take on the story-driven genre of shows back when no one else was really taking a chance on them. Alongside its sibling shows, it proved that content like it was worth people's time and energy, and no matter how bad things look now, it'll all be okay. Did it kind of fall flat near the end? Yes, absolutely. I'm not even gonna try to entertain how it didn't, but it also offered an experience that was comforting, exciting, thought-provoking, and more, making a space and a home for many artists, chefs, and even video essayists to share their enjoyment of the series, the good and the bad. I can also appreciate this series as a whole for pushing the cast behind it towards more music-centric projects. Zach Callison, Estelle, Dee Magnohall, and Rebecca Sugar especially have pushed out some amazing works that have really gripped me, tackling different genres that, not gonna lie, I would have never found out without the help of the series. And man, for me personally, this was an experience. Full transparency, I went into this thinking it wasn't going to be this much of a production. Steven was a series I haven't seen in years, unlike other shows I covered like Owl House. And I didn't think I was able to even make it what it is now. But looking back, God, I don't think I'd do any of it different. This felt special. The twists, the turns, and especially the highs and lows. It was all special. And no matter what I cover next, I'll never forget the time I had while doing this.